What's going on, guys? It's your boy Scrub here, back again with another video. Hope you guys are having a great day. I know I am, and today we're going to be doing another collection of scary, spooky stories, so sit back, relax, and enjoy. First off, I'm skeptical about the paranormal, and I always try to find a rational explanation for things. That said, my childhood home was and is undoubtedly haunted. A bit of a backstory. The house used to have a couple apartments, and one of those tenants murdered his wife in the house. He's arrested and thrown in prison for many, many years. Anyways, grandparents later move in, remodel, and then pass it to my mom when I was born. Here's a few encounters that stand out. The guitar incident. My brother, who was 8 years old at the time, and I, who were 12, were about to go to sleep when he starts crying uncontrollably and saying he's scared to go to bed. He looked and sounded genuinely upset, and he's normally very calm. I finally end up calming him down and we fall asleep. And a few hours later, my brother wakes up crying again and gets out of bed to wake me up. As soon as I opened my eyes and sat up, my guitar that was hanging on the far wall about 8 feet away smashes against my headboard as though someone lifted it and threw it hard at my head. We both screamed, but I chalked it up to be my fault for hanging it wrong. But I knew it could not have lifted itself and then propelled itself forward. I stayed awake the rest of the night thinking of every possible explanation that could have made it happen. I used to always have vivid nightmares about a scary woman who seemed to always be in my mom's walk-in closet. She would come out at night and hurt my mom, and one time, she was putting needles into her like a pincushion. Once, she was hauntingly and rapidly punching my mom's face, but it was like my mom's face was made out of clay, so she'd get horrendously distorted, and once she was trying to escape the room to get to my brothers and sisters, but because my mom was there, she couldn't get to us. Which was odd, considering the door of the closet wasn't just an accordion door. One day, my mom's siblings and I were downstairs eating lunch when my middle sister, who was 4, came downstairs crying hysterically and said there's something scary in my mom's closet moving the door. So my mom and I go to check it out, and I open the door about to go in, watching if there's any movement, and nothing happens. So I started to walk towards it, and the door started to move the slightest bit, and I paused. Then all of a sudden, it looked like there was a crowd of people behind the door, punching with all their might to get out. The door came out of the tracks on the top and bottom. The rattle noise was so loud and rapid, it sounded like a machine gun, and the unfathomable fear I physically felt made me ill. We ran out as fast as we possibly could to the neighbors, and we had the neighbor go in and check if someone or something was there. They checked it out and saw nothing but a beaten up door off its tracks, and we ended up moving about a month later. I lived in a haunted house for 10 years. I had 5 kids while living there, and every one of my kids saw the man in the hat on the wall. They all saw him between the ages of 2 to 5 as well. My kids turned 6 and suddenly stopped seeing him. Once I heard my son screaming for me in the middle of the night, and I went to him. He was 5 then, and he begged me to make his drawers stop. Stop what, hun? And he said they kept opening and slamming shut and I can't sleep because it's too noisy. Things got moved all the time and lost all the time. The spirit did not like babysitters and would torment everyone. The most violent episode was when I let my 15-year-old brother watch my kids. We got home around 2 a.m. and found my brother sitting on the steps in the hallway between the front door and the kids' bedroom, shaking and crying. He said that when the kids got in bed, the pounding started, everywhere, all over the house. At one point it was so bad he went outside to see if there were people hitting the house. There was no one there. He had gone out the back door to check, and when he walked back inside, he saw the reflection of someone in the mirror walking up the steps to the kid's room. He went running, thinking that someone snuck in when he was outside, and he checked everywhere and there's no one in the house. But when he was upstairs, he saw a shadowy figure sneaking around the corner of the steps. He heard the front door open and shut. He went running down the steps, but the door was closed and locked, and he proceeded to spend the next 3 hours chasing the shadow, hearing doors open and close. He never babysat for us again. No one would. I had lights shatter above our heads, and my children would laugh and talk to people in their rooms. We had a neighbor calling us at all hours of the night asking if we're okay because they saw gangs of people in our yards and sneaking around our windows. The cops got so used to getting the same 911 call that they stationed a cop in the back of our house to watch between 2 and 3. There's so many more scary stories, and the nightmares I had living there were deathly scary. We moved, and the people that moved in after us stayed for a month. They said it was too weird, and the house has been vacant now for 8 years. When I was younger, I used to take naps upstairs, but by the time I was 8 years old, I absolutely refused to go up there. The upstairs had two large closets, attics, I'm not sure what to call them. They ran from one side of the upstairs all the way to the other end on both sides. It was essentially a crawl space that was 30 feet long. It started one day when a friend and I went crawling from one side to the other with flashlights like kids normally do. Then I saw a girl sitting there in the corner acting like she wanted to play with us. I know a lot of people say when they see a ghost they aren't scared, just interested. Nope. I was beyond terrified. This girl looked normal, had blonde hair and a nice dress, and seemed friendly. I stayed silent, kept crawling behind my friend, and got out of the closet. Told him what I saw in there, and he said he didn't see it, but felt like he didn't want to go back in. Then my parents would occasionally send me upstairs to get something, and when I would get up there, I would see doors swinging open, as if they were trying to get me to come inside. I would lose toys and wouldn't be able to find them anywhere, and suddenly my parents would be fishing out Christmas presents in the attic and would find my toys up there. I remember being 8, my parents still asleep in the morning, and I leashed up my dog to go take on the monster in the attic. My dog, usually up for anything, refused to go off the top step into the attic. My parents never believed me with all the weird things that happened in the house, and I would get blamed for things that happened all over, leaving lights on, toys all over the place, things I knew I didn't do. Well, anyways, we move out of there when I was 10. Not a week passes by before the new owner calls us and asks if the place is haunted. Their daughter sleeps upstairs, and she says she'd been playing with a blonde-haired girl at night. My parents laughed at how crazy these new homeowners must be. To already make an already long story short, the girl started appearing in other parts of the house for them. They would look over while watching TV and see the girl on their daughter's lap. They looked up on the computer to the past owners and found a dressmaker that lived there and a little girl wearing one of the ladies' dresses. The family that moved in there were absolutely torn apart by the events, got divorced, and the dad stayed there and ended up dying there as well. So I used to live in a big house, 6 bedrooms, 4-bath, basement, by myself. I was there as a hiring perk and to look after the place for my boss who lived out of state but owned the home. One of those win-win situations. The first couple of months were fine, but when the winter came, I started hearing things coming from the second floor. It started with little bumps and bangs coming from above where I had my computer set up, and progressed to distinct footsteps coming and going across the second floor. I had been up to the second floor to check on it from time to time, and I knew there were unfinished areas up there. But one place always stuck out. An unfinished room that was sort of a walk-in closet for one of the bedrooms. It was attached to the garage attic, completely unlit, and it was open when I went up to investigate the noises. I shut the door and locked it. 2 nights later, there were more noises and footsteps leading from the unfinished room to the bathroom, and then nothing. But the worst part was the door. The door that led to the unfinished room would not stay closed or locked. I tried everything. Eventually, I pushed a bed up against the door to keep it from opening, and it seemed to work. A few months passed by without it opening, but I would find it unlocked all the time. As time passed, I would hear noises all over. Mostly footsteps, but an occasional thump with no explanation. I cannot explain how horrifying it is to hear little taps up and down the hall from the other side of the bathroom door during your shower. I eventually moved out, but another employee moved in, and his stay there lasted a month. The story he told me is that he was shaving one morning and heard a slam like someone dropped a stack of books outside the door. Then heavy footsteps like someone running down the hall. He won't stay there anymore, and no one in the company will live in the house either. I'll begin by saying I personally am more on the side of a skeptic frame of mind with any paranormal experience, but enough things have happened in the last year to make me at least question and entertain the possibility that this is legit, not just my daughter's active imagination. These events have only occurred in the house I bought with my husband in June of 2017. It was built in the 20s. First, in October of 2017, I'm laying my daughter down for bed in the dark with only the moonlight lighting the bedroom. She points across the room and said, "Mom, who's that guy?" I looked for a toy or something and couldn't see what she was referring to, so I asked, "What guy?" And she responded that he was right there, gesturing towards the closed bedroom door. Still curious, I asked what he was doing in case I could piece together a recent episode of Pretend Play or a toy she talked about, and she said he was hiding, so I asked if he was scared. She said, "No, he's hiding." Creepy. During this whole exchange, she was calm and chipper, not afraid at all. What made it strange is that she was 2 at the time and didn't really engage in pretend play or storytelling at all. As I mentioned, there were no toys in sight. And from there, we just had a funny toddler story to tell our friends and family that we affectionately named That Guy. This umbrella name we generally use for another episode or weird stuff that goes around. That guy's pulling a prank, that guy's messing around, that type of stuff. Next, in January of February of 2018, I was again laying her down for bed along with her 6-month-old brother. We were doing the usual cuddle-up night-night talk when she said something along the lines of, "Now it's time for bed, just me and you and him and her." My skeptic mind would argue that him could easily been our little brother, but at the time she was still adjusting to having a sibling and rarely mentioned him. And he wasn't included in any of the talk we were having. What was really strange was her. Who's her? The only other female in the house is our cat, and she wasn't even in the room at the time. Also, no toys were in bed with us, and no one was in the vicinity of her bed that she could have been talking about. A little later that spring, a new name came into view, Mr. Longneck. Short backstory, my daughter has this weird thing where she likes touching necks. Sometimes it's cuddly, sometimes it's playing, and we can't really explain it, other than kids do weird stuff sometimes. And it started before we moved into this house. Anyways, she was getting put down for a nap and was a little high-strung. She was doing her usual neck-grabbing thing and suddenly did it a little tougher than usual and said in a growly voice, "Mr. Longneck, Mr. Longneck." I never heard her use this name, and it isn't a character in any YouTube or Netflix shows she watches, so I asked who it was. She just giggled and was asleep 10 minutes later. This is when I started getting creeped out a bit. In April 2018, my husband found a time capsule in one of our heating vents, and we spent the afternoon looking through it. There'd been a fire in the home in 2019, which we knew about and which no one was hurt. But during the renovation, they found a bunch of old stuff in the walls, including pictures of the fire and a couple newspaper clippings. Among some of this old stuff was a stack of pearl buttons, a catalog from the 1940s, and a small notebook with handwritten names. I presume these are the names of the original inhabitants, and I plan to find the book again and look up the history behind the names as well as the home. After all this, my husband and I are suspicious that there is something paranormal going on. Maybe these objects are keeping energy here or something, and I know this is long, but we're almost done. In October of 2018, I was driving to my mother's house with only my son and daughter in the back seat. And along the way, my daughter, who's 3 now, asked from the back seat, "Mom, is that Grandpa?" I said where, and she pointed to the empty front seat and said right there. I told her Grandpa was at home, as he had recently just moved in with us due to health issues. There was no one around on the street of sidewalks at that point either. Now, there have been other minor events that have happened, but these were the biggest ones to describe in detail. I've posted this somewhere else as well and received advice to engage with her in further conversation when it comes up. And while we have to an extent to encourage her to be comfortable talking about it, I never pushed it in order to avoid leading to a conversation or pulling answers out of her that she would offer just to appease me. One day, though, and a few times later, I just decided to ask her about it. And below is a brief detail of what she said. "Can you tell me about that guy?" "What guy?" "You don't remember that guy?" "No." "Well, what about Mr. Longneck?" "Oh yeah, his face lights up." "Can you tell me about him then?" Basically, Mr. Longneck is a grown-up. He wears monster clothes and a hat, and he's nice but also scary. He says trick or treat but doesn't wear a costume. He lives far away and goes with Santa in the sky to his house where he belongs, and he comes to our house at nap time, which she no longer has but was in the afternoon. He knocks on our big door and walks through the kitchen. And these were her exact words while she was pointing at his path from the door to our living room window. I asked what he does, and she says that he plays with his spinny cow toy, which is one of those pull-string farm toys from Fisher-Price. She never plays with it, and I rarely see it, and I've never seen it in the kitchen. The specific details of this piqued my interest, and I also asked if he ever brought a friend. He brings a friend, and she's a little girl and has yellow hair like my daughter. She's never scared of these talks, as though she withdraws from the conversation when I ask about why his neck is long. The house I grew up in had a slightly strange design in that all the bedrooms were clumped together at one end of the house and the kitchen and living room were at the other end. The two areas were connected by a long, narrow hallway that had a bathroom in the middle and approximately 900 closets on either side. My bedroom door was at the end of the hall with 2 other bedroom doors facing each other across on the either side. Basically, it meant that if you were sitting in our living room, you could look straight down the hallway to my bedroom door. Now, lots of strange, frightening things happened in that house, but one thing that we could never rationalize or lie to ourselves about was the darkness at the end of the hall. Like I said, the hallway was long and narrow and it was paneled in dark wood, so it was dark down there. But with the living room lights on, there was always enough light to see down the hall and make out my bedroom door. But sometimes we'd be sitting in the living room and get a feeling that we were about to get attacked or something was about to happen. And when that would come over us, the end of the hallway would be blacked out. It was like someone dropped a curtain at the end of the hall. You could see part of the way down, and then there was just blackness. When this would happen, our 3 dogs, God bless them, would go to the mouth of the hallway and sit in a line across it, staring down the darkness. Sometimes they'd bark or growl, but mostly sat and stared. Once in a while, one of them would get brave enough to walk down the hall, but they never got more than halfway before they'd stop and back up. They'd walk backwards, never turning their back at whatever they were looking at. And after a little while, the oppressive feeling would lift, it would disappear, and the dogs would wander off. It didn't happen often, but compared to all the normal spookiness in the house, it was one of those things that we could never convince ourselves was just in our head. The house I grew up in was haunted by something very malevolent. We moved in when I was 10, and there was always something dark about the house, though I could never put my finger on it. Just vibes, I guess. For a while, anything that happened was pretty mild. Things flying off shelves, TVs turning off, that stuff. When I got to be older, though, things got worse. I started having these horrifying recurring dreams. The one night my friend was sleeping over, the next morning when we woke up, he said, "You need to banish that spirit." I asked him what he was talking about because I never mentioned anything about my house being haunted. And he said he had a weird dream. There was a very bad spirit haunting my house, and it didn't like me in particular. A few weeks later, we decided to use a Ouija board, and we went through the typical, "Is anyone there? What's your name?" stuff. I asked what I wanted, and it spelt out "kill you." I asked if it meant me, and it said yes. And I asked when, and it said soon. At that point, we just both noped out of it. Afterwards, though, things started getting really bad. I had these nightmares, but I was also just consumed by darkness. I can't even explain it. Just the worst depression and rage imaginable. I'd wake up with scratches on my body that I had no explanation for on more than one occasion. I woke up with a hand-shaped bruise on my arm and leg as well. I started trying to sleep as little as possible to avoid it, and it was the worst time of my life. I can't even begin to describe the darkness I felt. And this is barely scratching the surface of everything I experienced for the year I lived in that house, but suffice to say it was horrible. After I moved out, everything got better, and to this day, anytime I stop by there, I feel a horrible darkness. Anyways, guys, I think that's going to do it for the video. Be sure to press the like button, comment down below if you enjoyed all that stuff, and use code SCRUBBY at the G Fuel checkout. And yeah, I'll see you guys next time. I'm out. Peace. Don't get anyone pregnant if you do, make sure they're hot.